take a
Well, I am recording now, and we're joined from Washington, D.C. by news anchor Troy Washington there with Local News Live, a great TV channel. We got a room full here with us at Velma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for our friends at Madison Central, Ridgeland, and Germantown. We thank you so much for joining us. We're in the Arts and AV Career Cluster, and just such a cool job you have now. And I'll tell you, you're actually the third PV graduate that we have had this year. I know this is Jackson State Alcorn country, but you are a proud SWAC graduate originally from Texas, Prairie View A&M, also a college athlete. So that's really cool. So just take it, just give us a little background. You went to Prairie View, you've been in Indiana and in Shreveport. And how did you get into the news? Because it's a really, really interesting field you're in here.
Well, hello everyone. First I need to know who these other PV graduates are. I might know them, but PV Proud Panther, as you mentioned. Now, I am from El Campo, Texas, which is a very small town. I think we have about maybe 3,200 people.
Wow.
So it's a small town. I'm a small town girl. As you mentioned, went to Prairie View for college, played college softball. I was a right fielder. I used to have an arm. I don't so much anymore as you get older. So father time is undefeated. After college, now how I got into TV, I was in college playing softball. I started writing for the newspaper, doing the sports column, of course. I then said, hey, let's give TV a swing. So I went to LA and I interned at a station in LA, KTLA, out there, and I covered sports. So I got to cover Lakers, Clippers. At the time, it was the Pac-10. Wanted to be a sideline reporter. So I get back and I start looking at jobs with sideline reporting and working in the sports department at a news station. You start looking at it and you realize that there are only like one or two individuals in the sports department. But you look at the reporters, there's like 10 reporters. There's always a lot of anchors. So you have multiple shows when it comes to news as opposed to sports. I'm actually talking to a class. My producer just walked in, but we'll interrupt real quick just to say hi. So this is my producer, John.
Awesome.
Ryan, my co-anchor, is right there. So back to, what a pleasant interruption there, but back to how I got into news. So I came back and I did an internship at Fox 26 in Houston, and I interned with news. I was able to shadow a reporter. Back then they had photographers. A lot of people know you don't see as many photographers out in the field anymore, because as I was starting news, we started to MMJ. So by the time I got my first job in Albany, Georgia, I kid you not, I applied to like 300 jobs. But it was also because I didn't know how to go about entering this industry. I think that's something I talk about a lot, having a resume reel and having a cover sheet. We don't do, news is the one industry where it doesn't operate like some of the careers you might choose. You need a resume on camera, and you need a cover sheet that reflects, it's not just your standard cover sheet. It shows a little bit of personality. You need it to jump out because there's a lot of competition. A lot of people want to be on TV. Yeah. And contrary to belief, I believe I started out in Albany, Georgia as the 5 o'clock producer making $27,000. Now, I don't even know if that's livable, but I made it back then. So I started in Albany, Georgia. I packed up everything, drove my little Mazda 17 hours away from my family for the first time. I was a producer for a year, and then I transitioned into reporting. I got my shot just by being ready and prepared. On the weekends, because I knew I wanted to report, I would go out with other reporters and shadow them, put together a tape, because sometimes you might not start where you want to be, right? But you can use the resources where you are to get where you're trying to go. So I would go out, shadow those reporters, and I had access to the equipment, to the editing, and I just used every moment to make myself better, to make myself, to just refine all the skills and things I wanted in my toolkit. Because honestly, the more versatile you are in this industry, the further you will go. So eventually someone got sick, and my news director knew that I knew how to put together packages. She knew I knew how to write. She said, hey, here's your chance. I did my first package, and from there, when a opportunity for promotion came open, I was promoted.
Wow.
From there, I was referred to Shreveport for the first time because I've done 2 stints in Shreveport. At the first time, I was a reporter, and then I said, "Hey, I wanna go into anchoring now." So I started filling in on the desk in Shreveport. From Shreveport, I went to Memphis, where I anchored and I did reporting, mainly the morning show. And honestly, Memphis is probably one of my favorite markets. I loved every market that I've been in. There's just something about Memphis. So I was in Memphis for 3 years, covering the Mid South, and then I went to Indiana, and I was in Indianapolis. Worked every shift there as well during the pandemic, which was a very different time. I got my first Emmy nomination while in Memphis,
Wow.
and the strange thing about that is I had submitted so many times, and I was really trying to figure out how do you earn a nomination. So I started judging them so I could see what it takes to win.
Wow.
I I'm very much an athlete in the sense of I review tape, I look over things. I want to know what it takes to win, what it takes to even be in the number. So I do encourage you, if you're interested in doing anything, like shadow those people who are doing what you want to do, or look at their path and know that your origin story may be different, but you can learn a lot from people who have already done it or what they're looking for, when you're going for, maybe a position that you're interested in. Okay, what's the style of news here? Okay, how do I fit into that? A lot of times when you're applying to a news job, that particular station probably has a way of doing things. So if you can appeal to their style, you'll probably grab their attention. You're more likely to. However, that nomination, the first one, was from a riot that I covered when I was 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
um, yeah, I would not recommend covering a riot 8 months pregnant. It probably isn't the safest thing to do. But looking back, I felt really accomplished. Something that you don't think about at the time you should be afraid of or anything like that. But a very important story to tell, and I was glad that I was able to take part in it. We did not win, but a year later, I was nominated for 2 more, and I ended up winning for
Wow.
we were covering the riots that broke out during the pandemic.
Wow.
So George Floyd riots, we remember
Mhm.
how big, that was wide reaching when it came to protests and people just being outraged. So being able to take part in that and carry in that coverage in a way that appealed to the emotions of many, it just was a very important topic to be a part of. So very grateful for that opportunity. Unfortunately, I hate that it was surrounding such a
Yeah.
tough topic. But that was my first Emmy win. I hope to win more. After Indiana, I came back to Shreveport to be the main anchor for the ABC affiliate. And really, I've always enjoyed Shreveport, the community there, the people, and the character of the place. And so being back there and just being able to launch a podcast. Now podcasting is a big deal. So if you are looking to go into this, I mean, just realize there's so many avenues now. It's not just news, it's
Yep.
digital podcasting, it's using Instagram and social media, because people aren't waiting. They aren't sitting at home and just waiting for the news at 6 o'clock anymore. They're going online, like with our streaming service that we do. That's essentially what Gray TV and Local News Lives is. We're a 24-hour streaming service that brings you the news, and we cut in and we bring breaking news and whatever's happening as it's happening right now. And I think that's the direction that news is going in. So fast forward to here I am, working for Gray TV, Local News Live, but not my first Gray station, because Albany, which was their very first Gray station, the station I started at first, is actually in our Gray TV news network. So now I get to cover all of these stations, some of them that I've crossed paths with along my journey. So
Yeah,
I
and
think it all.
WLBT here in Jackson is also a great channel.
Yeah, so it's all full circle. So we're essentially the network for Gray TV.
That's awesome. Now, you did mention some very important things, because you talked about all the different skills that you've had to do in television, because it is not just let's smile on the camera and talk. There's camera work that has to be done. There's writing. There's obviously speaking that has to be done. There's graphics. So there's a lot of skills that go in to putting on a newscast. And a lot of it is done before the camera ever comes on. And then it continues once the camera rolls. So, what are some of the skills that you've learned being a news person, that made you a better news anchor?
I will tell everyone I'm really grateful for my opportunity to produce starting out, because you understand what it means to put a show together. You're not just out there reading, you know that the writing needs to be good. And sometimes even when you look at the different shots that are set up, like if you see maybe a person over at that wall right there, then you know that, hey, that's actually been put in the script to be framed that way. Or if you see someone sitting down and doing a one shot or a two shot, you just see different things. The blocking of it all, the
Yep.
framing of it, that nowadays we kind of say that like producing isn't the art that it used to be, because people are just throwing shows together. But it really is an art when it's stacked correctly and it flows nicely. And you can now in some of these small markets, you don't always have the resources that you would have in a larger market, where you can see the moving cameras or all the bells and whistles that you might see on CNN. But just knowing the behind the scenes, it helps you to understand how it all goes. Like anchoring, you're kind of out here blind. You're relying on your producer. You're relying on the people in your ear. You're relying on what's written. And producing really helps you to refine your writing. I really feel like the best journalists are good writers.
Yep.
They understand how to convey a story, how to change their tone and their voice from story to story. So if you're doing a story on someone celebrating their birthday, and then you go to a story, a tragedy, you have to be able to switch your tone in a way that it transitions well, but it is also not just all the same. And so I think you learn that your voice is an instrument. I learned that from producing. And then reporting, you understand the value of time, because producers are in your ear with our earpiece and they'll tell you, hey, you got 30 seconds or you got a minute, or hey, can you stretch a little longer? And so you're all working together. If nothing else, the important part to me is that being able to have done all these positions, I've learned the importance of working together. It all comes together to make put the bow on the show. So if you have a good producer who's communicating with you, they write really well, you guys work together, they know what stories you like, you know what they like. And then you have an anchor who you know that they're going to be able to ad lib. And, you know, even if you have to let them know. And honestly, I think the best reporters make great anchors, because sometimes you're reporting and you're live at a scene and you just have to talk about something.
Yeah.
And you've ever seen someone on breaking news and they're literally telling you like, so yeah, we're seeing people run away from this scene. And just a few moments ago, you heard gunshots, and you can only imagine what people are feeling right now. You can see people hugging. You can see them with the tears in their eyes. Let me just put in perspective for you how far we are from where this took place. You're using your entire surrounding, and you have to own your space no matter what role you do in news, whether it's anchoring or reporting. The biggest thing, and I always tell people, is to own your space.
Yeah, and along the same lines, if somebody wants to work in television, but they say, I really don't want to be on camera, there's a lot of jobs behind the scenes. So what are some of the other jobs that are going on while you guys are doing a newscast?
So we usually have directors, and here we actually have our producers who do the directing as well. But typically at traditional stations, you have your behind the scenes directors. They do what you're like the punching when you see the names, like President Biden delivers remarks on jobs. I'll show you that on the screen. Just get a visual of it. Let me put my screen, trying to figure out how to, oh, there we go. So that banner that you see there where it says happening now, I don't know if I can zoom in, probably can't. But whatever you see public, and there's someone punching that up. There's someone queuing the video up. There's someone who is editing the video, putting it together. So there are a few different things that you have going on. A lot of people don't go into meteorology right now, but that's another option too. That is definitely in front of the camera. Outside of producing, here we have a content producer who schedules our talk backs. Ryan, anything else behind the scenes that you can think of?
I think just producers maybe meeting and talking about like shows. But in terms of jobs, I think you covered it. Producers, director, the news director, Kyle.
Yeah, and we have managers. I mean, that's behind the scenes, but it's also a big part of news gathering, the news content, because someone has to conduct a meeting and say, hey, all right, you got a story pitch? What's your pitch? How does this impact our community, our neighborhoods? Why do people care? What's going on? What's important to this area right now? What's the big stories happening now? What's new? What can we follow up on? Consumer reports. So you have a news director who usually kind of takes the lead on that, or executive producers. So their role is essentially to gather everything and just kind of keep an eye on the news gathering process so we can put everything into a rundown so we can put the show into motion.
Yeah, and another thing about the news business that makes it interesting to me is that the schedule, because when you're on TV, people are at home or they're at work. And and you said you've worked all the shifts. The morning people have to get there before the sun comes up, and they are on the air as people are waking up. If you're doing the evening newscast, you're doing the newscast after people have gotten off work. So what are some of the schedules like? Because some people hate it, some people love it.
Well, I think we're the only industry that kind of does it this way, but we say overnight shift, we say mornings, you might work dayside or night side. So those are the options that we have. Right now, we would consider this a morning show, but we work 6 to 2, which is not the norm. When I was in Indiana, I worked a true overnight shift. I had to be in place by 4 a.m. So that means you have like a 12:30 a.m., 1:30 a.m. wake up. And you're usually out of there 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Now, if you work dayside, that's your 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. That's what you would consider like a 9 to 5. Night side, which I feel like night side is kind of I like that shift the best before becoming a mom. But night side, 2 to 10 or 2 to 11, depends. I just felt like that was a shift where you can really sleep in and kind of enjoy a bit of your day before going in. It's a little bit harder though, because if you're a reporter and you're trying to set up interviews, people get off at 5 o'clock. So if you reach out to them around 2 o'clock, it really is hard to get something done. So I found when I work that shift, you have to start a little earlier before you come in.
Yeah. Now, before I get to the students' questions, one thing we see a lot of, and we had a controversy in Jackson about this a few years ago, about the diversity in the field. We're seeing more and more Black female meteorologists. We're obviously seeing more Black female anchors, but there still needs to be more diversity in this field. So what are some things that you're seeing as far as trends and diversity in the news business?
Well, we're seeing a lot more of diversity, inclusion, and equity. We even had a panel when I was with Scripps, which are different companies are starting to include this in the fabric of what they're doing with their company. I know here at Gray, that's something that we've always emphasized. And when it comes to ambassadors, I was an ambassador my first go around with Gray, but we try to make sure that we're appealing to everyone. We want everyone to succeed here, and Gray does a good job of moving people around in the company. So I think it is continuing to, it's always been around, but I think people are more aware of the need for the inclusion and just specifically targeting diversity and making sure that everyone feels welcome in a space.
And that's the thing about, any type of television, whether it be drama or news, you have to consider the amount of people watching and the types of people watching. So you have to really find a way to cater as much as possible to every single person that could be watching, because the information is for everybody. And I think you made a great point earlier about making your voice your own, because you have to find a way for the person watching it to understand from any perspective what the news story is, because with your intelligence level and your insight, it could be difficult for someone to understand it if you don't make it easy for them to understand.
Well, I appreciate that compliment, but as I mentioned, I'm from a very small town, and I grew up on what would be considered the other side of the tracks. But so I think that I always possessed an ability to relate to those different communities and neighborhoods that maybe people were afraid to go into. But a lot of the markets that I have covered and worked in, Memphis, and we know about First 48 and Shreveport, 80% Black. There are a lot of communities that feel underserved.
Yeah.
When it comes to broadcast, and some people who may feel like we don't come into those communities unless something terrible has happened. But all I can do, and I think most of the colleagues that I've worked alongside, we're very aware and conscious, and we really do care. So we want to emphasize not just the bad stories, but understand that those stories have to be covered too. But we want to make sure that we're going into these communities and we're saying when progress is being made, when good things are being done, and when there needs to be a light shine for the positive things as well. So it's all just really balanced if you think about it. But Shreveport, Memphis, yeah, and then Shreveport twice. I mean, I honestly have covered, and those places were two of my faves. And I know Jackson is predominantly Black. There's a large diversity push there, but I think that is important, and I think it's important to feel like you are represented in all spaces. And I mean, I have a little one, and I think about that all the time, how important representation and how that plays a role in what you see, what you believe, and the hope that you feel, especially in your community.
Yeah, and I think it's important, I've had other guests and they say, I think what I do is important because other people need to see what's possible. Because when you see something is when you start to believe that you can be something. But I do have some questions from the students. I'll get to as many of these as I can. These are all ninth graders. And these are, some of these are really good. This one's Juliana King, and she asked, what are your favorite topics to cover?
I love helping people. So anytime I can use the platform to make people aware of a cause that people may not know about. Specifically, I did a story in Shreveport about a young kid who had a rare blood disease and he needed a match. And it really opened my eyes to the need for more African Americans to join the bone marrow registry. And so I really like stories where I can actually make a difference.
Wow. Oh, and I meant to ask you something too. How many wardrobe changes do you do? Because just 30 minutes ago, you had on a different outfit.
So we shot that yesterday, the green outfit.
Okay,
That's
yeah, that was quick.
So no, just one a day. Oh.
This is Jaden Thompson, and he asked, was being on the news always your plan, or did you want to do something else before you got into the field?
Well, I mentioned that I was interested in sports, but in high school, my family encouraged me to become a nurse. And I had a teacher, Miss Perales, who she said that I would be doing my life a disservice if I went into nursing. And I took that very personally, and I was offended when but she explained to me later on, like a week before graduation, that I felt that I should do something in the communication realm, and she felt like I would be really successful there. And I took her advice, and I didn't tell my parents, and I switched my major my second week in college. And I was stuck in the nursing dorm the first year, but that was great because they helped me with math.
That's funny. This is Jordan Smith, and he asked, how do you feel when you have when you have to manage stress of a tight deadline?
Anxious, but I think you learn, like, a minute really starts to slow down when someone tells you a minute and you've just been used to this. I don't think it gets easier, but if you do it every day, you're always working under deadline, the pressure just feels normal.
Yeah.
If that makes
Here's a good one. This is Iverson Miggins, and he asked, what strategies do you use to maintain composure while you're live on camera?
Well, let me go back real quick because I do want to address that. I also like to say we're not doing heart surgery here. So I always tell myself, use and it will be okay. We'll live, we'll get it on the air when we do, hopefully on time. But I try not to put too much pressure on myself. And as far as what I do, usually before my newscast, I always close my eyes and I just say, Lord, help me. And then from there, I just let the parachute go off the cliff and I just glide in to a successful show. But you have to find whatever works for you as an individual, because I feel like whatever kind of centers you, calms you, and allows you to just remember that it's not brain surgery. You're reading the news and you're talking and you're having a conversation, and people are relying on you to just give them what's going on in the world.
Wow. And that's a great segue to this question. This is Taylor Harris, and she asked, were you nervous when you first started working in news, knowing that a lot of people were watching?
I think nerves are good. It's just how you channel them. I think I'm a big Beyonce fan, and she said one time that if she stops being nervous when she's performed, she'd probably be done with it. So I think nerves are good. I think it reminds you that you're excited about what you're doing.
I just got two more. This is Jada Smith. I'm sorry, Jada Schaefer. I can't read. And she has, what are the biggest challenges you face when you're on newscast?
Well, it depends from day to day. There's anything that can go wrong. I mean, the prompter completely can stop working. You can run into some grammatical errors that you didn't anticipate. There's breaking news that can happen. I think you have to try to be ready for anything, but knowing that you don't know what that anything might be that might happen. So you have to be able to just go with the flow. And for me, a lot of people don't know this, but I've always struggled with my speech because I have a speech impediment. But I have worked at it for several years, so many people don't notice.
Wow.
But I encourage people that don't let anything stop you from what your goals are. Because if you work at them, you can really accomplish whatever it is you put your mind to.
I just got one more from the students. This is Kamari Newell, and he asked, what's your favorite part about being a broadcaster?
Being able to use my platform to make real change. I grew up single parent household, and I feel like a lot of people try to take advantage of people. And working in this field, there are many times where I'm able to empower other people, use my voice to help people that people may otherwise try to take advantage of.
Wow. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you for joining us. I know you're up against a cut in as well. So before we go, we're also a rural area of Mississippi. We're an all-Black community, but we are just such a hard-working community with a lot of passion for success. But again, it's all about seeing things that are possible, because you came from a similar area in Texas. So why should these young people consider getting into this field to make a change that you're making today up there in Washington, D.C.?
Because just like the change that I'm trying to make, like your own particular job is going to have a different purpose to it. So if you don't enter this field, if you're not that voice or that person in the room willing to stand up for that, who's to say that it actually happens? So if you want to be a part of change, you have to be the person to kind of lead the way, in a sense. I mean, you can put it in the hands of someone else and hope that it gets done. But I've always felt if I wanted something to get done, who better fit than the person who has these experiences, who has empathy that someone else might not be able to convey? Who better than you to make the difference that you seek and that you want to?
Absolutely. Now, tell us where to us.
That in this industry.
What's that?
And we need that in this industry. We need people, and we need people who understand being human.
Big time. Now, before we go, tell us where to follow you on social media. You're a great social media follow, and where we can watch you online.
Troy Washington TV on Instagram. And if you want to email me, I'm always down to mentor or help someone. I mean, I know that I didn't know how to go about getting in this industry, and I'm always willing to help someone else if they just need to be steered in the right direction, or even some pointers, or even just to keep in touch as they start their journey. But it's Troy Washington TV at yahoo.com. My Facebook is just Troy Washington. I think that's pretty much it. But reach out to me. I would love to connect with you guys and keep in touch and help you to accomplish your dreams as well, because it doesn't matter where you come from. It's all about where you're going. And sometimes you just need a little help getting there.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, we thank you so much for joining us. I know you got the president coming up soon here on Going Live. So we appreciate you taking some time before you cover the president. So that's kind of a big deal. So Troy Washington, all the way from Washington, D.C., we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
Oh, no problem. I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Sounds
See
good.
ya.
Bye.